Good evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to Hilaal Live. My name is Faraz Patel. We'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us. For this week, I will be opening the show as Cape Town from 7 to 9 o'clock tonight. We'll be having a special pledge, and there are people on the ground in Gaza from Islamic Relief South Africa. Now, we, of course, again, see another day of difficulty for the people of Gaza. The death of children within that part of Palestine has now gone to over 1,000. Mothers, of course, seeing the death of their kids, fathers seeing the death of their kids, children seeing the death of their parents. And it raises the question, the aid that was supposed to get to Gaza is just stalling at this moment. And the people of that very same place are being denied their basic human rights. As we speak at the moment, the US President Joe Biden is about to visit Israel. Now, we don't know whether that's some sort of a cosmetic visit or really the American president actually means it. We wait to see what happens. But to talk about what is currently happening within Gaza, and of course, greater political repercussions to all of this, I'd like to welcome Professor Hamoud Salhi. He is a political science professor at the California University. Professor, assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah so much for joining us here on Hilaal TV.
Wa alaikum salam, and thank you for having me, Faraz.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. I think both you and I, Hamoud, have seen just the scenes unfolding within Gaza. And I want to bring in, of course, the international perspective from this, because we've seen many human rights organizations from Amnesty International and so on, of course, declare what is happening in Gaza may closer to it being a genocide. But it just feels as if when those bombs are keep being dropped, these rulings, these decisions that have been made, it just really has such a huge repercussion on the people of Gaza, doesn't it?
So, for some in the Western media, the story of Gaza is perhaps the story of Israel. The victim started October 7th. And how dare they, those Palestinians, which they call Hamas, terrorists, or names, so you could name them, how dare they do what they do. But those of us, the region itself, the people in solidarity, the average person knows very well that this wasn't an act that happens just as sudden. It was accumulation of colonialism, of exploitation, of violation of the basic human rights issue, the result of a collective punishment of a 2.3 million Gazan who lived for years now, starvation with no basic necessities. They were collective punishment that international law doesn't accept. So this is not the result of an event on October 7th. What October 7th did is change the perception or the belief that actually there are people there who are called Palestinians and who are brave enough to defy all atrocities that the Israelis have committed. So while that happened, what we've seen afterward today is actually, it is clearly described amounts to genocide. Or how can you explain it? I mean, we're talking about a continuous bombardment from air of Palestinians, cutting of water, electricity, the basic needs, and these are all a violation of the Geneva Convention. It specifically puts the responsibility of protecting the civilian, protecting the population and their colonialism in the responsibility, in this case, of Israel. So in more ways than one, this is the victor writing history, controlling the media and every aspect of it, playing the victim to engage in what is now known as a Zionist project for many decades. For 75 years, the Palestinians have gone through this. So while this is not something that happened today, the Palestinians have gone through this for many years. But the atrocities, the way things are being done, and in the eye of the of the public, it's sad to see every Western leader showing up now to visit Israel, to comfort them, to do all of that. But and that's the danger in that, is that Israel will use this to continue further exterminating and annihilating the entire population of Palestinians.
Prof, I look back at, obviously, the Nakba. I wasn't born then, and I don't know whether you could maybe share some light, with friends and family, or even those who came before you, to maybe talk about the Nakba and the people who had to take their belongings. And I look back a few days ago, and it's sort of like a copy and paste of what is happening. There's like a Nakba 2.0 that is happening, where the people of Gaza have to leave their place, go to the Rafah border, because that's the only place they can go to. And you just have to ask yourself, it's once again a violation of international law, something which Israel couldn't care less about.
So the Nakba in 1948, the Palestinians were subjected to the same atrocities, and they had to flee. At the time, they thought they were leaving temporarily. So what happened? They left to Lebanon, to neighboring countries, Jordan and Egypt. And the belief at the time is that they are going to come back, but they never come back. The project that we're witnessing today is ingrained in the philosophy of Zionism. But more than anything else, back in 2002, the project of moving the Gaza to Sinai was sort of surfaced. It came back during the war in 2008 and 2014. In both times, there was a plan to have the population of Palestine leave Gaza permanently, and the plan is in Sinai. Now, there are Arab countries who are sponsoring this project in Sinai. The United States is behind this idea. Israel is as well. The only country that is standing against it now is Egypt, who categorically refused to accept, to make or to open its door to the Palestinians of Gaza, because they are they know very well that they'll become refugees, and it's an attempt of Israel to get rid of the population. So you get rid of them by bombarding them, by killing children, and this is documented by every Israelis. You call them animals. And even in this case, when they tell people to move, and they have, by the way, under the responsibility of under the rules of law, the rules of wars and international law, they have to warn people before they bomb them, and it's a tactic they use not efficiently, meaning they don't give time for people to leave. In previous cases, they would send phone messages or text messages a second or literally a few seconds before the planes bomb the Palestinians. So it's designed to get rid of the populations, and then you play in the propaganda game, the public relations game, by saying, look, we told them to leave, but they're not left. The fact is Those who left, they tell them to go to the south, for example, or to the north, or to areas, and then they bombard them, they kill them. So what you see, this is the tragedy for us, is that you have a narrative that you could see it on the Western media, but there is another narrative that you see it on the Arab media. That narrative is contradicting to what you see in the wars. And it's not like being pro-Palestinian or being pro-anything. You could see it. For example, you see building destroyed, put to the rubble. And you wonder, where are the people? But then you see on the other hand, Israelis who are, taken care of, talked about, made this personal. So the objectification of the Palestinians is very well documented in the Arab media and the Muslim media. You see actually what's happening. You have people on side, and that creates the anger. Every Arab person on the street today is angry at two people. The Israelis and their Arab leaders for failure to do. And on top of that, for the Western world. So just imagine when we talk about hate, when we talk about building relationships between between Arabs, Muslims, and Westerners. This is a clear example that is not the case. And not long ago, before October 7th, see how the Western world treated the refugees of the Ukraine. So the tragedy of this is that we don't live in a vacuum anymore. The pictures, what Israel is doing in Palestine is very well documented, and it brings anger, it brings frustration, and it brings, honestly, violence that we've seen because as a result of that. So those are, so when you talk about Thenakba 2.0, it has been going on for a long time, but this is the opportunity that Israel sees that it could take. Because look, every leader, you can't even say anything against the Israelis today. Every leader, almost every Western leader is in support. You have, two carriers, American carriers. You have American soldiers or 1,000 or special forces ready to fight for Israel. So if you are Netanyahu, with all the trouble you have, this is an opportunity for you to take this to the extreme. And sadly enough, he's doing it at the expense of the Palestinian, and sadly enough, at the expense of international law and at the expense of humanity in general.
After the break, I continue my conversation with Professor Hamoud Salhi. To just close off the segment, one journalist in Al Jazeera saying this is probably the most brutal of all conflicts he has covered. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. I'm still in conversation with Professor Hamoud Salhi, political science professor at the California University. Shukran again for staying with us, Hamoud. I want to bring the elephant in the room because I think a lot of people have probably ignored this, Professor. I think both you and I have seen Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was under a lot of political pressure due to corruption allegations within his own party, the Likud, who actually were at one stage looking to oust him as the leader. Of course, October the 7th happened, and this united, even his opposition to form that wartime unity government. And I think for both you and I as Muslims, Professor, it's frustrating, isn't it? Because if there's a sense of unity that could be done from the Israelis, surely there could be a sense of unity from the Muslim world. Is that a fair statement?
It's a fair statement, and to the point about Netanyahu being in trouble, he continues to be in trouble because we have seen demonstration recently asking or demanding he resign and to be brought to justice. That's about Netanyahu, but you are clear that the Israelis are united in this, or the majority of the Israelis are united in supporting military violent war against the Palestinians. Now, on the other hand, these are really historical reasons. Sadly enough, the Arab world and the Muslim world are less what you call the Western world democratic. And they have strong ties or dependent ties with the Western world, and specifically with the United States. In the Arab world, this is reflected clearly in the huge difference between the people's support for Palestine and the leaders who are standing on the side doing nothing or finding excuses not to do anything. But structurally, this is the result of dependent policies that the United States has with this country. The United States learned its lesson after 1973 that it will make sure that the Arab world, that the flow of oil will continue, and one way of doing this is to make sure that the Arab leaders are under control. Just before this, we've seen a huge movement toward normalization between Israel and the Arab and some Arab countries. Even Saudi Arabia was on the list of that. And for the prince to say what he says, that we have relationships with Israel, and the relationships are moving forward, and we always had relationship. That's an amazing revelation from a state or a kingdom that is perceived or that expected to be siding with the Palestinians and with the Muslim causes. But the October 7 changed that. Now, the reality of all of this is that whatever happens after this, we are going to see some major problems, because the Arab masses are not going to stay idle. More than anything else, Jack Sullivan, for example, the national security advisor. I'm sorry, I mixed his title, but Jack Sullivan, the National Security Council advisor or secretary. Please check that.
Yeah, sure.
And if you could delete it, would be appreciated. Jack Sullivan was on record for saying, the Palestinian cause is marginal. Netanyahu echoed that. And for years, the Palestinian cause was outside was no longer part of the core values, we were told. But this changed. The Palestinian cause is now back into the center, and the Muslim world has to take action. I mean, we're talking about Al-Aqsa Mosque, we're talking about Al-Quds, and the Organization of the Islamic countries did nothing. And when you look at a reason for it, that organization is led by Morocco, a king who has strong relationship with Israel. They normalize the relations. In the old days, we used to say that the Moroccan king, Hassan II, used to tell us he has a weapon that can explode anytime in Israel. He was referring to the total number of Jews that left Morocco once Israel was established in 1948, because the total number of Jews from Morocco were the highest number. That number today is gone. But to the point is that even with that power to influence Israeli politics, even if we accept that notion that this is their homeland and will work with it, the king, like other leaders in the Arab world, done nothing to use their powers to ensure that the Palestinians have a right to exist. So yeah, it's a tragedy. But again, I go back to the narrative. You have two narratives that are sort of different, and two narratives that appeal to their own audiences. The narrative in the Muslim world, the narrative in the Arab world.
Prof, I have to stop you. I have to get in this next question because we are running a bit out of time. Prof, talking about obviously the Arab and the Muslim world, what do they need to do now? Because we've seen many protests from the citizens, and both you and I can agree that the power of the citizens outweighs that of the government. What are these Arab leaders going to do now when, of course, they sit down, which you may assume it may happen sooner rather than later. When they do sit down and talk about what's going on, what stance do they need to make? Can they stand up against Israel in the USA, even in the face of this normalization of ties, and even in the face of the USA having many of their military bases within the regions in the Middle East?
I think a peaceful expression of views are very, very important. Playing a role in social media, debunkling the fake news. I mean, the myths that we've seen in these events are tragic, and this is not the first time that we've seen this. The pressure on their own governments and whatever means they could do is very, very, very essential. And expressing your views, I think this is. And in addition to that, you have grassroots movements, political organizations, political parties, and then there is this always perception that Israel is invincible, and there is the Israeli lobby. But you have people are demonstrating, continue to demonstrate against Israel. Somehow, somewhere, that message will get through. We're no longer in the old era where you show up to a place and you have signs and demonstrate, and you have you time yourself to the TV news time. And no, today's social media, you are your own control. So do your part. The Palestinians today need a solidarity, and they need to be heard. And that we've seen this weekend demonstration all over the world, and that's the least we could do at this point.
Professor, just to end this conversation, the question I asked obviously earlier on the Arab leaders, this is going to be a make or break for them, isn't it, in terms of the decisions they make? You've got President Joe Biden visiting Israel. One would assume he's going to visit some of the Middle Eastern leaders. Do they have it in them to put him in his place to say, enough is enough? There has to be some solution to what is going, and there has to be accountability for the actions that have occurred.
So there are a couple of things for this visit. Well, there is the Iranians who have been very, very rational, very respectable, more than one way. They're basically saying to the United States, there are consequences. You don't expect to be here and not having consequences. So there is that Iranian deterrent threat on the back, and this is understood. We are told they are there for the Iranians. You also have Hezbollah, who is sort of on the background, and they've been attacking Lebanon to get Hezbollah because that gives them a reason to fight. And then you have the Palestinians, so you have that on the side. And then you have the sad stories that the Arab leaders are known to say things, but they don't practice what they do. Jimmy Carter used to say he could not believe it how the Arab leaders would tell him something in private, and then they go on and say differently in public, meaning that in private they would support Israel, but in public they would against it. So I expect that to happen. But I think the United States is very, very cautious and is very worried about what's happening, what has happened. And very briefly for us, while this seems to be about Israel, but the United States for the first time felt that its biggest ally in the region is not strong enough and has to come to its rescue. It is coming to its rescue because of the threats that it's seen coming from the Palestinians, but more so by continuously doing what Israel has done, propagating, putting that social media, that fake news outside there, and because of the illegitimacy of most Arab leaders, it is in the region. So yeah, I would sort of venture that the United States would make sure, Biden is making sure that the Arab leaders stay put and they support him, but they can go outside and say messages differently. But the United States is concerned, and I don't roll it far, that they will put pressure, or they are putting pressure of Israel not to go with the ground forces. But that's another topic of discussion because what the planes are doing, the destruction of Gaza, I don't know how much more you can destroy the city, the country, Gaza anymore.
Professor, shukran so much for making the time for us. Unfortunately, that is all that we have. We really appreciate you making the time for us here on Hilaal TV.
Appreciate it. Take care. Thank you, Faraz.
Ameen, ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We're out, right? Well, thank you so much.
Ameen, ameen. It's an absolute pleasure. Assalamu alaikum to you, Professor. That's Professor Hamoud Salhi. He's a political science professor at the California University. Early hours in the United States, but he has made the time for us. Before we go to the news, do remember the parents of Gaza who today have to put the children to sleep, not knowing when that next bomb is about to hit them. We will have your news after the break. Do stay tuned to Hilaal TV.